Good morning. What an interesting market we trade in each and every day. And as we try to navigate our way through yesterday, what a strong, impressive day from bell to bell. The markets were absolutely screaming to the upside and an impressive follow up to the long weekend, 4th of July weekend. Closed on Friday. We open up on Monday. We open up strong. We continue to hold on to that strength throughout the day. We virtually jumped immediately, and after we jumped, we stayed there for the entire day. It was really, really impressive. Now, added about another 130 points just in the last 45 minutes of the day. We've seen this time and time again. Well, we saw it again, but we started off strong, did not fade, and then that last boost that we got late in the session, as a matter of fact, finishing up 460 points to the upside on the Dow. S&P was up about 50 points. Then you look over at the Nasdaq, 225 points. That's an amazing move. Again, a little over a 2% move, 2.2% to the upside. Now, what were some of the areas that were really powering this? Well, financials once again contributing. That was great, but it was the industrials. The industrials, when you look at Boeing and Raytheon and Dow and so those kind of names, that really was a lot of the fuel behind what was moving the markets. But yes, the financials, you can't deny. When you look over and you see Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, American Express, all of them up anywhere from 2.5% to as much as 5% for Goldman Sachs. Those are big moves in single days that you don't see all that often. Although during the circumstances that we're sitting in right now, we've seen that a little more often than we normally would. So that's something that's very, very special. Now, when I look over at the Nasdaq, and we talk about the 225 point move to the upside. Well, what was really powering a lot of that? Well, take a look at Tesla yesterday. Oh my goodness sakes. The shorts are getting squeezed, and I'm not even sure how many shorts are left right now in Tesla, but there's also huge dollars and huge volumes in the option market contributing each and every day to Tesla. And I'll tell you what, a 13% move on a stock as big as Tesla is, when you look at the dollar amount that it's trading at right now, that's really an amazing move in a single day. So you had that, you had Xilinx, you had Amazon, all of those up more than 5.5% a piece across the board. Then add in Apple and Microsoft, the biggies, always seem to be contributing as well. Just a big, monstrous moving day once again for the Nasdaq. Now, oil remains around 40, a little over 40. You look over at gold, hanging around that 1800 level. You look over at the volatility index. A lot of people say to me all the time, because I talk so much about the volatility, hey, Pete, why didn't that go down further? Because it's not the fear index. It's an index that gives you a great way to measure what has the market's been moving in terms of the size of movement already and what is to be expected. So where were we? Around 27, 28 yesterday, somewhere in that range. Today, hanging around that 28 level once again. Now, the kind of moves that we are getting, and I talk about the intraday moves all the time, but when you see these kind of moves, 1.5%, 2%, but then you look at the intraday and you look at all of the movement as well, it makes a lot of sense that we are still trading somewhere close to that 32 level, which would indicate about a 2% move in the S&P each and every day. Now, the movements we are seeing is a little bit less than that right now, and that's why we are a little bit less than that 32 level. It's why we're down into the 20s, the upper 20s, but the 20s nonetheless. So that's something that plays in. If there was any weakness yesterday, the only area that really stood out a little bit was probably the utility space. Some of those energy names, the Marathons, the Hess, the Duke Energy, that kind of thing. There was a little bit of negativity there. There's no doubt about that. But wherever you looked yesterday, it felt like things were moving to the upside in a very, very broad move from the markets yesterday. SMH, again, hitting new highs. We talk about these chips all the time. The contribution there. You look at the biotech names as well. Here's a couple of stats for you you're going to like. It's the fifth day that the S&P closed higher this year in 2020. That's the only time we've had 5 consecutive days of the S&P closing higher. So that's one stat. The other one, a good friend of mine passed along to me, the Shanghai Composite, up 8% in 2 trading sessions. 2 trading sessions. That is a giant move, guys. We talk about different things all the time. We talk about the global markets, and that's just a great example of just keep an eye on how many times have we been talking, especially recently, about some of these Chinese names and some of the unusual option activity. And yesterday we talked about Alibaba. Stock was trading about 235, jumped all the way up to 240. What were the calls they were buying? This week's expiring 240s. Those moved in a single day. They needed 5 days. They didn't even need 5 days. They actually were able to accomplish a monstrous move in just a single trading session. So gives you some sort of an idea of just how rapidly things are moving. And it's not just here. Take a look at that Shanghai up 8%. That's a big move in just a couple of trading sessions. So you gave back some of the gains when we were looking at the opening bell. We looked like we were going to open down about 200 points. And we haven't recovered a whole lot. The Dow actually in this first hour of trade did recover a lot of that, but still holding down about 170 now. So pulled back a little bit, then started to sell back a little bit closer to where we were on the opening, but trading somewhere between, call it 160 and down about 200 points. That's where the Dow is right now. But you take a look over at the S&P, it was pretty red. It was following along with the Dow and then made it all the way back to trading into the green. And then you look over at the Nasdaq, which it was hanging in there. It was actually green to flat, then started to press real early when it went into the negative, down about 0.3% or something like that, and then started to rally back once again. As a matter of fact, I'll check it right now. Now we're up about 0.4% or 40 points right now on the Nasdaq. So a pretty nice move once again. What's dragging on the markets right now? Same thing that was pushing it to the upside yesterday. A lot of those industrial names are part of this drag. You got Boeing, you got Dow, you got Raytheon. Those names, once again, pulling on the Dow, specifically those names. But add in the financials. We talked about financials contributing yesterday. Well, now they're contributing to this downside move. Now, this is about half the move that we had yesterday, not even half of the move yesterday. So we are seeing some push down to the downside when we look at Wells Fargo, when we look at Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and American Express and Citi. Those names definitely a bit of a drag on the Dow right now. But when we look over at the Nasdaq and you see that big positive move once again in the face of the negativity on the other side of some of the other indices, wow, it's the SMH once again. It's Tesla once again, up 3.5%. This is following up that monster day yesterday. Then you got Netflix, and then you've got a lot of these names that are the go-to names when people get a little bit concerned once again. Some of those gaming type names, some of those names like Take-Two, Activision, Zoom, PayPal, those names all right now in the positive, and then throw in Biotech. Now, this doesn't get talked about nearly enough in my opinion, but when we talk about the big five, the power five, and everybody focuses so much, and then all of a sudden you start to expand, it's not just the chips, it's some of those biotech names, specifically on certain days when we're digging a little bit deeper and we find some of these names that are absolutely then becoming explosive names. Some of them smaller market caps, I'll grant you that, but Regeneron, nice, strong, powerful move today. Novavax, that name's up 34% today. Now, a lot of these things, we are talking about coronavirus, we're talking about vaccines, we're talking about drug companies that are all trying to work either individually or working together, most of them in partnerships, to try to find something to combat COVID-19. So, Corvus Pharma, it's only up 108%. 108%. Can you imagine that? Now, that's a very small market cap, and none of these are recommendations. I'm just talking about where are some of the moves that we are seeing in this marketplace right now. That's where we are seeing some massive moves in the biotech space. Vertex, another one of those names. Now, oil, still hanging around 40. Gold, still hanging around 1,800. Talked about the VIX, trading right around 28. Makes a lot of sense. Right now, I'm showing it exactly at 28. We're just about an hour deep into the trading day. Now, we've had a lot of different moves going on in the marketplace right now, and we talk about some of these volumes, and some of the volumes have just been extraordinary in specific names. And then when you start to see the volumes, and I do put this out where I talk about not just the individual volume, but the breakdown of the calls and the puts. That's not a breakdown of buying and selling, which is the most important thing for us. We need to know, are they buying or are they selling options? Is this part of a buy right, which is a far less aggressive move, or is it some part of a spread or whatever? That's what we do. That's what we try to break down as best we can. And our great systems and algorithms that we have built are able to break it down and tell us buyers versus sellers and all the rest of it. But still interesting to note when I try to put out some of these volumes that the slant of the amount of calls trading versus puts, and a lot of that can be due to spreads. That's why these volumes can be a little bit deceiving, and I want you to understand that a little bit in better depth. It's what we talk about. We talk about a lot of these various things, and that's why the education level is so important, and why you've got to have your knowledge in the derivative space to understand the breakdown of what all that means. Like, if, for instance, if it's a spread, well, if they traded 50,000 calls on the day, did that mean they bought all these calls? No, it did not. What that means is 50,000 calls have traded. That could be a 25,000 call buyer against a seller or vice versa. It could be a lot of different things. So there are so many different ways that you've got to break this down, and that's what we try to do here, Market Rebellion, and I think our guys do an absolutely unbelievable job day in and day out. So Nasdaq making that nice move to the upside. You got Facebook, by the way. Facebook, how amazing is this name? It was $245, made that sprint in less than a month or so, up to 245. It had that huge pullback with a lot of the pushback on Facebook and a lot of the folks that were going to be not using the advertising for the month of July. Stock dropped all the way down to 206. It started to recover, and now all the way back up to 245. That's going to be a story that everybody's going to be following today as well, is the conversations that Facebook will be having and what the next moves will be. Now, I've talked about this for quite a while. That's a huge move to the upside, though much faster than I think anybody expected. Just last week, I had bought some more, added to the Facebook stock that I'd had, and I never expected this thing to turn the way it did. So when you see stuff like this, you've got to be very, very disciplined. That's my advice to you right there. Now, more buying in Facebook today. A very, very large, very, very short-term buyer of Facebook. But that's not the unusual option activity I'm focusing on today. That one's very interesting. It could be also a little bit toxic. So I'm going to move to something else. Stitch Fix. This is a name that we've had hit on multiple occasions in the past, and it seems like they've been oftentimes more right than wrong. So that's why this one stood out for me. It's why I wanted to highlight this. 5,600 of this week. Again, now we talk about it all the time, how short-term people are looking. This week's expiring, so the 10th of July, expiring 31 calls. Stock was trading around 29.5. They were buying these calls for about 30 cents up to 60 cents. Stock was trading a little bit higher, then it pulled back once again to about these levels. But keep an eye on where that stock is. You don't want to be chasing things and that kind of thing. But I will say, very interesting to see this, because this is a stock it's going to have to make a pretty decent size move in a very short period of time. But that's what we're seeing, and that was one of the unusuals that I saw very early in the trading session. As I say, we're only 1 hour into the trading day. Let me give you one real quick update. We got the Dow down about 192 points. You got the Nasdaq up about 40 points. The S&P is now back into the red, down only about 5 points. It was down 20 plus points earlier in the day. And now you've been looking at the volatility index, still trading right around 28. So that's the quick update. Now, there's a lot of different things going on today. I think that a lot of the focus obviously will be towards Facebook. So that's something I think we're all going to be watching to see what kind of movement. But early on, we are seeing Facebook trade a little bit higher after trading even higher yesterday and having some pretty nice sessions in its back pocket after that big sell-off early last week. Folks, have a great day of trading. This is the Market Rebellion. Educate yourself. Knowledge is king.